what a lot of people don't realize is those bodies of water in those facilities, they use so much chlorine to disinfect those things to make sure it's well treated. It's actually scary. So imagine you can have aquatic facilities with no chlorine, no chemicals, no side effects, and byproducts of chlorine.
Okay, welcome back to Exploring Growth. Today, my guest is Kevin Gast, founder and CEO at Water. And this is a fascinating company that he's building here. And when I got connected with him, I was like, okay, I could totally see having one of these at my home. So I was just naturally energized about this conversation. I'm glad to have him on. Let me give you a quick intro or background to Kevin. So Kevin's story began in the family construction business. And this is where he worked his way up from job sites to CEO of a multinational conglomerate. Along the way, he incubated a radical idea for chemical-free water purification using electricity. When the concept proved viable, he stepped away from the parent company, pulled the IP into a new entity, and founded Water. Today, Water is one of the fastest growing companies in the industry of the industrial water tech industry, with a global vision, multi-million-dollar investment from Tim Draper and other backers, and a technology platform serving major B2B sectors like manufacturing, municipalities, real estate development, and disaster relief. And that's what I want to get into is all those last things we talked about. He has such an interesting, innovative product. How does he not get pulled into all these markets and lose focus? So welcome to the show, Kevin.
Lee, thank you so much. And thank you to your viewers as well.
Yeah, this will be fun. I had David Heacock on the podcast a number of months ago, who's building what he wants to be the global leader in air purification. He has filterby.com. And we had a similar conversation about focus, but I know this is going to look a little different with you because, we were talked about this a little bit before. You had this idea, you took it to the market, and of course, everyone got it immediately. And they were like, yes, this is a problem. Everyone said we want to use you. So, now you're just at a point where, okay, which market do we go into? Do you go to residential? Do you go to municipality? I mean, you can fit in every single market. And so that's what I want to talk about. How do you not get pulled in to all these markets? And I think what would be good is for you to just to first kind of a little more detail lay out what it is that Water is and the product that you are bringing to market.
No, thanks so much. And I think, simplistically, and that might be just a bit of a golden thread that I'll pull through with the conversation, is simplicity. Water in itself is a company that is sort of at the cutting edge of what's doable in the water treatment, water purification space. We've now won the CES Best of Innovation Award. We've won the World Future Award. And this is sort of seen as a technology and a company that's about to sort of revolutionize an industry that hasn't changed much in 100 years. So if we look at water filtration systems and reverse osmosis membranes and chlorine disinfection methodologies, it's been the same thing for 100 years. Sure, you get much better filters. Sure, you get all of these things, but it's the same type of technology. And over the last, let's call it 10 years or so, a new field came about from that, which is the more electricity-based or electrical-based water treatment systems, where people use high voltage electricity and they combine it with a filter or a membrane or a chemical to come up with a new treatment system. And we're a little bit different. We don't use chemicals, filters, or membranes, and we use very little energy to do it. And sort of our piece de resistance is our Faraday reactors, which is the ones that won all these awards. And it's basically, I think the media sort of dubbed us the sort of Tesla of water treatment. And I guess the nuance there is both myself and Elon are born and raised in Pretoria, South Africa. Obviously, Tesla and everything else uses electricity, and I use electricity as well for the water. And ironically enough, the first money that went into Tesla and SpaceX was through a guy called Tim Draper that you mentioned earlier from Draper Associates. And Tim was one of our first investors as well in our company. And he jokes with me. He says, look, the last time I invested into a South African born in Pretoria that uses electricity, it kind of paid off well. So I've got high hopes. So it's been an interesting journey on that basis. But that's exactly that. It is the difference that we're coming to market with is that simplistic component to it. It is hellishly complicated and it is sophisticated, but it is very simple in the same thing. And I've lived by a motto my whole life, which is simplicity equals perfection. I've got clean hands makes for clean living, and transparency equals success is the other ones that I do. And then the other one is small wins equals more wins equals big wins. That's kind of, those are my sort of go-to axioms that I live by. And simplicity equals perfection is the one that we pull through pretty much with everything that we do. And how we approach the different markets and this type of technology, because this is a sort of a step change in what what one can do. And that could be municipality, residential, data centers, on-site reuse for commercial buildings, stadiums, whatever your heart can desire, you have some or other application for this. And once we started developing this business and this technology over the last couple of years, I call it the squirrel nut problem, where you're a squirrel, you run around, you see a nut, and as you're about to pick it up, you see another nut, and then you see another nut, and before you know it, you see all of these nuts, and you end up not picking up a single nut because there's just too many options to choose from.
Yep.
So you're forced to sort of sit in that scenario where you have to start figuring out a way of, where do you impinge first and how do you do that? And I think water is different. It is a completely different entity in the industry. And if you ask anybody in the water purification, hard, deep tech, industrial space, everybody will tell you it's the most unsexiest industry you can find, because everything comes in a catalog that's about that thick. With little pictures and a part number, a SKU number, and it has a little specification. You need to order it from there. And it's very, it's just not nice. And we just said, look, we can't do it this way. We have to have a bit of a blockbuster Netflix moment, a got milk Nike moment as a business. And we need to flip it on its head and flip the script. And that's sort of how water got born. It is two V's that make a W at the end of the day. Some people even joke with us and say, look, if you're in the East Coast or the West Coast, it might even just be a gang sign, with the two V's coming up.
Yeah.
So we are different. We're fresh. We are rambling the industry entirely, and we're just doing things differently. And water has been designed as a company and as a technology to disrupt aggressively. So to get to your question of, how do you sort of attack all of these markets? Because there's just too many, and there's, the squirrel nut problem. How do you focus? So the way we sort of went through it is just on a matrix basis. In other words, what's the lowest hanging fruits first? Where's the least amount of competition? The least amount of regulatory challenges? Because believe it or not, I'll use a great example. We're in literally 2025. If we look at reverse osmosis and membranes that were developed, 70s, 80s, they've been around for a very long time. But legislation in the US still requires that you run a year-long pilot program whenever you utilize these things for testing purposes, even though it's the go-to thing for the last, I don't know how many decades now.
Yeah.
So, legislation and the sort of state and federal level don't catch up to it. So regulatory constraints is significant. We see now with the new administration that's come in that there's been a massive impetus and a sort of a cut out of the red tape with modular nuclear reactors, because we need energy. So we hope that that's going to happen the same way with the water treatment industry, where more advanced water treatment technologies can sort of be pushed to the front line, which is a lot safer, a lot smarter, quicker, cheaper, smaller footprint. So we look at these matrix things from, regulatory perspective, lowest hanging fruit, least amount of competition in the industry. Mm-hmm. And then also at the same time, where are the niches? You can go in and compete against, if you're making televisions, you can go and make another television that has better pixels and, a bigger screen size, but you're competing against, hundreds of thousands of other televisions in the industry.
Right.
But if you're looking for niches that you can sort of conquer and create a moat around, then suddenly you can dominate quite aggressively. And that's the way we've approached it, in that baseline with that matrix.
So which market niche did you choose to go into first?
Well, this is now probably where this becomes super interesting. Initially, when we started, my gut feeling was the real estate and aquatics market is probably going to be the most dominating market for us, because when we build these artificial beaches, we do artificial beaches as well, 4-acre, 30-acre, 5-acre artificial beaches. The competition is very, very little. There's like 3 or 4 companies worldwide that can do that, which is great. And we now have, a big advantage, because we don't need to have municipal water to feed these large bodies of water. We can do gray water, wastewater. We can treat some of the most contaminated water and utilize that to turn that into a beautiful, luscious, crystal blue water body at the end of the day. So we saw that as a big market for us. We saw the new and up and coming surf parks. It's a big amenity that's being driven across the US right now. So instead of having a golf course or a top golf, people are building surf parks where it's a large body of water that generates 6 to 8 foot waves. And we said, well, we could be an aquatic water treatment specialist in that, because the complexity of treating aquatic water is super simple.
Yes.
It's not very complex versus wastewater or industrial water that is quite complex.
Yes.
And then in the same breath, also aquatic facilities, the Great Wolf Lodges of the world, the Kalahari resorts, Typhoon, Six Flags, all of those facilities, those type of water parks. And that water treatment is very, very easy then at the end of the day. So we saw real estate and aquatics is quite a good market to attach first.
Yeah, you just listed all the places that I won't go, because I don't want to have my body in that water with all the other people that are there with their bodies in that water.
No, so on the aquatic side, what a lot of people don't realize, an actual fact, is those bodies of water in those facilities, they use so much chlorine at the end of the day to disinfect those things, to make sure it's well treated. It's actually scary. And if you use, I think what's something else that people don't realize is that chlorine needs 15 minutes of contact time to disinfect. In other words, if you have a glass of water and you throw chlorine in that exact glass of water, and it has to stay in there for 15 minutes to disinfect whatever is in that water. So now you can imagine how much chlorine they actually dump into those facilities. And that's why it smells that bad. It's why you're all red when you get out, because of all that chlorine. So imagine you can have aquatic facilities with no chlorine, no chemicals, no side effects, and byproducts of chlorine.
Yeah, it seems like it would be a safety improvement for sure, but then a branding, value add to say, hey, we utilize the highest technology. As you probably noticed, it doesn't smell like chlorine, and you guys, you don't have to worry about getting this and this and this disease. I mean, I don't know how much you want to put that in your marketing, but you know what I mean? Like, I think that would be a value add for these places.
Not only that, but we then said, right, real estate and aquatics. We then said, right, what's the next sort of obvious choice behind that? And we said food and beverage and industrial, because food and bev, the regulatory requirements are stringent on those guys. They need to meet a very specific niche. They have money to spend. And there's a lot of challenges around that. Things like PFAS destruction, dealing with specific high content elements as well. So we saw a lot of those factors for us as a big thing. And then thirdly was wastewater, sewage water, drinking water, municipal, large infrastructure as a third one. But the problem with that is you have a 2 to 3 year sales cycle instantly just in that product. It is very slow. And the challenge that you have is, we know this for a fact, and I've been to, I don't know how many wastewater treatment facilities in the US. And I think if the general public just knew how bad these facilities really are and what condition they're in, they'll think twice about doing certain things.
It would go quicker. Your sales cycle would be much improved.
Yes. And I call it the Billy Bob problem. So, and no offense to the actor Billy Bob in itself, but
okay, any other Billy Bobs out there,
or any other Billy Bobs out there, yes. But I call it the Billy Bob problem, where a lot of those guys are highly unskilled, haven't had a lot of exposure, because a lot of the guys that are significantly skilled to manage those facilities are phasing out right now. And there's not a lot of people that want to run a wastewater treatment facility per se. So you get these guys arriving on site and go, well, do I need to add a cup of chlorine or a bucket of chlorine? And there's no measurement, there's no control. And a lot of those facilities are ailing and failing and deteriorating at a rapid rate. So if you look at the water cycle, if you flush your toilet, it goes down the toilet, it runs into a wastewater treatment facility. Now, there it goes through multiple different steps. It gets pre-treatment, primary treatment, where they're separating all of these large inorganic materials, the
Sure.
condoms, the tampons, the pads,
Yeah.
all the things that shouldn't be in
The
there.
fun stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They then break that down, all the larger components, to smaller components, and eventually it ends up in something called the secondary treatment, where you're now clarifying these things and you're separating, you're flocculating more particles and precipitating heavier stuff down to the bottom, and you're trying to get all the solid components out. So after secondary treatment, it's very rich still in all the bacteria, the good, the bad, the ugly, and anything that wants to kill you. Things like Cryptosporidium, Legionella, Giardia. These are some really good things that really want to kill you.
Yes.
And they're all still there. So what happens is, with most of those things, they go through a tertiary process and a disinfection process. Now that might be, chlorine gas. There's UV. I mean, there's a multitude of different applications how they do it. And then they would, in typical things, they would hit it with a chemical. And they call it in the discharge chambers. They hit it with a chemical, and then before it then gets discharged into the local river, stream, or creek or well, they dechlorinate again. They add certain other chemicals to remove the chlorine again, and then it runs down the river and the creek. But now think to yourself, when you flush the toilet at home, you have testosterone in your body. Women have estrogen in their body. You're flushing maybe tablets down the toilet. So there's pharmaceuticals, trace pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
There's so many different cocktails of things floating in
Yes.
there. And most wastewater treatment facilities don't treat those things.
Yeah.
They don't handle those things. So eventually all those things end up going down a river or a creek or a well, left to Mother Nature to handle it. Mother Nature is not geared to deal with those problems, right? It then runs down the river. Eventually it goes to a Lake Travis, a Lake Mead, some catchment body of water. And then from there it goes to a drinking water treatment facility, who just whacks it with some more chlorine again. Then you get it in your tap and you drink it. So at anywhere in that process, where do they remove the endocrine disruptors, the trace pharmaceuticals?
Yeah.
This is the challenge that you're faced with when you're drinking tap water. And I'm not saying that's all tap water. I mean, there's some really good places that really treat their water, but a high margin of tap water is definitely contaminated, even the tap water that you find today. So with wastewater treatment facilities and that whole water treatment cycle that you see, the challenge that you find or that you have is the current technologies available right now are limited to handling a lot of those contaminants. But more importantly, the ones that can do it is hellishly expensive, large in footprint. They need a massive amount of energy, and so forth and so forth. So wastewater treatment, municipal, we always said is going to be a challenge. It is a $560 billion TAM, so it's a gigantic market.
Yeah.
And if you just take a little slice of that, you're doing very well as a business, but the sales cycles take a little bit longer. And then last but not least, the industry we decided also to tackle is what we refer to as the residential market. And then we cover the entire life cycle of water itself. Because again, people don't realize it, but all water is recycled water.
Yes. Yeah, because everything you just mentioned, all that gets dumped in the river, or the river goes to the aquifer or to the ocean aquifer, and we're pulling it back up to drink it at some point. It's filtered through the earth. So, I mean, you've got the rain cycle and all of that. So, yes, it's all recycled in some way.
One way or another. From that's why I say the dinosaurs drank the water that we're drinking today.
Yes.
And I think what a lot of people don't even realize is, if you live in LA, so I'm sorry to say this for anybody listening that is living in LA, but if you're drinking LA tap water, there is a high probability that before that water touches your lips, it probably passed through at least 272 kidneys. Everything upstream from where people flush the toilet, it goes through the wastewater treatment facility.
That is gross.
Goes down the river again, it gets picked up again and again and again and again. So that's the reality. All water is recycled water. So we said to ourselves, how do we cut through the whole life cycle? Yes, we want to solve the problem at source, which is the wastewater treatment facilities, the drinking water facilities, but it's going to take us 2 to 3 years to get there. And then it's going to take us another 10 years to do all of them, or 20 years or 50 years. How do we solve your problem as the home resident? I'm a father of 3 teenage girls. I drink tap, well, I don't drink tap water, but I'd like to drink tap water.
Yeah.
And I shower in that water. I live in Texas, in Austin, Texas. The water here is very hard water. So you end up having to deal with the water softener and you need to add salt. And that sucks. I
Hmm.
hate that sliminess of that water. It just sucks. Why does anybody need to live like this? So, and the problem is if you go to any of the big players out there, the Culligans of the world and so forth, they'll just sell you the same junk they sell to everybody else. I'm not
Yeah,
saying that
I can
Culligan
tell
sells
you.
junk, but
Yeah, well, no, but it does. I mean, this is where my story starts because talking about this as a solution for residential. We have hard water. We live in Florida, just north of Orlando, and we have hard water. And looked at solutions, and I talked to a contractor of mine who's done some work for us, and he's like, "Yeah, I bought my system, typical system, UV plus salt, for like 8 grand." I was like, 8 grand? You spent 8 grand on a system like that? And come to find out, it is the wild west when it comes to pricing these systems. I mean, they're everything from 12 grand to $200 on Facebook Marketplace, and you hire a plumber to put it in. I mean, it is archaic, right? But it's just about how it's marketed and sold. They knock on your door or whatever. The people knocking on your door these days are solo reps, but they used to be Culligan reps, and so I have a big problem with it because I'm like, first of all, I'm not paying 8 grand for old technology when there's something better out there. Now that I know it's coming down the road, and it's just this constant feeding of salt and changing the UV bulb and all of this stuff that, to me, the value's not there, even on a lower price point. So when I heard you're talking about treating it in effect, like having a Tesla battery on your wall, like having the Tesla approach, I was like, sign me up. I mean, that's a much better business model, much better, digestible model for the residential owner. And I know that the water's clean.
and I think, I live in a house here, and for instance, the other day my wife said to me, "Look, I don't know what's going on with our water treatment system or the water softening system, but I'm itchy everywhere. My skin is red, my hair is getting brittle, my skin is dry. I run multiple businesses, so I'm not, actively watching my salt levels in my
Yes.
home water softener system. So I opened this thing and I realized, well, I think I might have needed to add salt in this thing at some point in the last 2 months.
Yeah.
And so here I went off to the local Lowe's or the Home Depot and I bought some salt quickly to get it solved. But I realized again at that point how desperately a home residential unit is needed. And I mean, our technology is very much geared for some of the most roughest, toughest waters you can find on this planet.
Yes.
I mean, we do our mobile units that we have that do 100,000 gallons a day of water treatment, where we do disaster relief applications and contaminations and these things, and they deal with some really nasty stuff. So the home municipal water is actually very easy cleaning water.
Hmm.
And I said to my guys, look, we can't, this can't go on any longer. We have to get a machine ready. So we ended up spending, I think it was last year October, we started kicking off and developing a prototype. And eventually that came about, which a product we called the Shield. So it can protect your home. And they come in different sizes, from 2-bedroom homes to a 7-bedroom home. And it is literally, you have an app on your phone. You can see what the quality of the water is going to be that comes into your house. You can see the quality of the water after it's been treated by our system going into your house. And at the same time, I said, look, let's put in a pressure pump into this machine, because I love showering and I hate showering with low pressure water because it just
Are you
sucks.
kidding me? You've solved that problem too?
Yeah, so we ended
Oh,
up just
well, I
putting
mean,
an
sign me up.
yeah,
Seriously.
we ended up putting an automatic pressure pump in there where you can control it from your app and you can just dial it up. You say, look, I
Oh,
want
I love
70
that.
psi, and you can punch up and increase the pressure through your entire house, and 3 people can have a shower at the same time without even noticing that there's somebody else showering.
Oh man, you'd be literally solving a big problem we're having in our house right now because I put off getting a water filtration system because I didn't like all the options. So knowing it's clean and not hard water with all the contaminants, but then the pressure, we had our whole, because we have a 1955 house, so we're renovating and we had the whole thing replumbed underneath, and so I thought, well, that solves our pressure issue. Nope. I mean, so we still got a pressure issue. If there's
Yeah.
someone flushing a toilet or taking a shower, we got issues. And I don't like that either. So the fact that you have both of those, man, sign me up.
Well,
Seriously,
you're gonna have water filtration, you're gonna have water softening, and you can have enlightened pressure as well. So
that's amazing.
you need to not worry. You can actually rest at night saying my family is drinking safe water.
Yeah,
Their hair is not going to fall out. So all of these guys that sell these shower filters,
yeah,
these, we're going to remove them out of the market. We're coming for them. We're coming for each and every one of them
that's
because
awesome.
this is just going to handle the entire house. Why buy a shower head every month? It's just stupid.
Now that we're down this road, this kind of getting very personal for me because literally right now, these are the problems we're having in our household and complaints from our kids and et cetera. The one other sort of tertiary issue is landscaping. We put a lot of landscaping in, and if we put a salt system in, then we can't, we have to use city water because we don't have reclaimed access. So city water comes in, we'd have to tap into that, put the system in, and that gives us good water for the house in theory. But then we're also now can't irrigate our yard with that same water because the salt is not good for the plants, end up killing our plants. So tell me, did you solve that problem? Like, how does that work? Can we have pipes go in different places?
Yeah. So, I mean, you can put this in as your main line that feeds your entire house and your irrigation. There is no salt. You're not adding any salt. There's no UV, none of that. It's utilized through our Faraday reactor systems that utilizes the electricity. We actually do the descaling, get the calcimites, all of that in. It actually attaches through to our anodes and our cathode systems inside. We have, depending on the amount of volume and the hardness of your water, the system automatically backwashes itself at high pressure, cleans itself, like between 12 and 1 a.m. whenever you're sleeping. So you never even realize it's there. And you never have to buy a
That's
bag of
amazing.
salt again. You would never have to buy a UV lamp again. You would never have to buy a filter again. It's all done with electricity. And the electricity, it uses less amount of power than a typical tumble dryer at your house. So
Okay, so talk to me about a little bit about your infrastructure and where you're at in terms of going after that market. Because, I mean, I literally would have someone out tomorrow to do this if it's available. How's this work?
So we realize that we're not residential experts. We're technology experts, right? And we know our technology and we know water treatment and water purification technology very, very well. But we don't have an HVAC system, a plumbing system, etc. So we've been spoken. Well, let me rather say it this way: we've got guys like Culligan, Masco, who owns Delta, and Hans Grober, our good friends at Kohler. Kohler, we all know Kohler, and a few other very well-known players have approached us and said, "Hey, we saw your Shield product at CES in Las Vegas, and we're really interested to work with you. We can handle distribution, manufacturing, all of these things. So we're busy working with all of these guys and working through a potential partnership agreement. And the idea is that sometime later this year, we should have our first few prototypes coming out. And then hopefully by early next year, by maybe Q1, Q2 next year, we should actually have a full machine that's going to be issued out for all homes, and that will go through one of those partners that I mentioned
That's awesome.
through a partnership with them.
I love that model. So then it gives them something else to grow their business because they have new options now, not those legacy systems that no one wants and they keep spending marketing on and no one wants. Um, but it also allows you guys to go to market rapidly. So that's I like that. That's really cool.
Yeah,
Okay, let
and I think also you'll see happening right now. You'll get door to door salesmen knocking on your door, telling you, "Hey, we're selling you air to water solutions." This is the new craze as well, where people are buying these things like a generator for your house,
yeah.
but it's an air to water thing, and that's now being something that's being pushed quite hard as well. But the rules of thermodynamics apply quite stringently to that technology. So if you have a small house, it will work very well, and a few other challenges that comes with it. So we still believe that a technology like ours is hands down the go-to solution for 1 bedroom to 7 or 10 bedroom homes, no matter what.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense to me in terms of how you would go to market for residential through these sort of channel partners. But then if we go back to the municipality function and to zoom out for a second, I love this bigger vision of like basically treating all the cycle of water. I think that's amazing because really at the end of the day, sort of like philosophically, but in practicality, once you fully get into the market, you are adding a huge value to humans that consume water, both consume it, take showers, dispose of it, the whole cycle. So I think that's pretty amazing. It's amazing from a business opportunity standpoint, but also for just doing good by humans. So if we go back to the municipality for a second, break down your technology a little bit, because there has to be a physical component, like you talked about on the residential shield, and then there's a technology piece of it that you can do Bluetooth, and maybe you guys can connect to it from your company to help solve problems. And I'm interested on the municipality part, because you were saying that you are sort of influencing other, and maybe this is my words, but you're influencing other tech options in the market, because in that market you may not be the only solution because there's a lot of complexity to it. How are you influencing other tech that's in the market?
Yeah, I think first off, just some limitations on what we have with our technology. We cannot desalinate. So if you have
Okay.
salt water, we can't remove the saline or the salt out of that water. We
Okay.
can reduce it a little bit, but we can't desalinate. The other limitation that you have is it can't handle large chunks of stuff. So any large, big solids, anything above, let's call it a 20 micron, that becomes challenging. However, we've developed more technology. So we have our Faraday reactor. We have another specialized machine called an ADAF, which stands for Advanced Dissolved Air Flotation Machine. And basically, we generate micro and nano bubbles inside this machine. And if the water lies there, these little bubbles go and they grab those particulates, get captured inside those bubbles. And those things can flocculate to the top, and the heavier stuff precipitate down to the bottom. And sort of right down the middle is this nice, perfectly clean scoop of water, if you want to call it that. So we've developed a bunch of other technologies to try and sort of fill in some of the gaps that we don't have ourselves. However, if you're looking at municipal wastewater, sewage, drinking water market itself, you will see that you have different stages. Now, traditionally, anything in pre-treatment, primary treatment, that would probably be more conventional, traditional technology irrespectively. And then somewhere here in secondary treatment, tertiary, and disinfection, where those solids get less and less, that's where our technology would slide in. Now, from that market itself, a lot of people say, you know what? We want to build a brand new wastewater treatment facility. We don't want to spend $10 million for a brand new reverse osmosis membrane system that has a bunch of biofouling and sediment formation on the membranes. And it's going to cost us $10 million, and it's not going to work very efficiently. We want you to build us a brand new facility from scratch. That's not a problem. We can do that. Or you're going to have a customer and says, hey, we're dealing with OSHA requirements. It is a very big challenge. The price of chlorine has gone up 10 times in the last 2 years. We want to replace the entire disinfection section of our water treatment facility. We can do that as well. So there's a lot of that modulation from bolting onto an existing system, even if it's an old system, to building a brand new state-of-the-art facility that can last another 50 years. And then that coupled with a bunch of AI as well. We have a system called Red Star AI, which is our own proprietary AI system. And the idea behind this, and this is basically our full self-drive mode of Tesla, right? But for the water treatment side. And the idea behind that is in any water treatment, if they call it feedstock water, so the contaminated water coming into the facility goes through the entire treatment train, and then they can test it before the time and afterwards. But then it has to go to a lab. It takes 2 to 3 days to get the results back. So if anything goes wrong, they only pick it up 3 days later. And then they have to reactively fix whatever went wrong and then see if the fixes they made was effective, and then test again another 3 days, another 2 days, whatever it might be. So we said, this is not the way to do this. There has to be a better way. So we said to ourselves, can we not put in a proactive solution where we load everything with a bunch of inline sensors from pH, flow, temperature, nitrates, phosphates, ammonia levels, whatever, and feed all of that data into a neural network, standalone AI, and that AI can learn from what's going on. And then based on what's happening to that feedstock water coming in, it natively automatically adapts the treatment machines and equipment to adapt to that so that the output water always stays the same, which means you never have a deterioration or a contamination of quality of output water. And that way it's even safer then to do it because you remove the Billy Bobs from the equation.
Yeah.
And you reskill the Billy Bobs to operate an AI and watch a screen with a mouse versus having to put in a bucket or a cup of chlorine.
That's amazing. I love that. I mean, that's super cool. It's cool that there's people that like you out there that are changing our world in such a positive way. This is, in my opinion, this is capitalism at its best.
Well, a good friend of mine, Jim Beach, just launched his latest book called The Real Environmentalist. And he wrote a piece about me and the company in there. And his whole premise about his book is that the real environmentalist of this world is not somebody like Greta Thunberg or people that hug trees. The real environmentalists are the capitalists that are putting money behind it and then really making a big change. And that was the whole premise of the book. And it shares my same sentiment. I'm a very big environmentalist. Money is one thing, and we all need to put food on the table. We all have families, but my mission around this, and this is the mission of the company, which is clean water for all humankind. It is to solve a problem because I can see what is in our food, and I can see what is in our water, and I can see how that is affecting our children's generation, and nobody's doing anything about the water. Sure. We've got Kennedy that's coming now that's tackling the food and a few other challenges around that. But nobody's actually doing anything about the water. And this is where we're coming in.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And ironically, it's sort of like capitalism fixing the problem that capitalism created,
Yes.
because we kind of got off track for a number of years where, everything's in our food and our water and it's pharmaceuticals and all the stuff. And I think it's cool to see a solution come to market that can solve that problem. So, good on you and everything you guys are doing. Thanks for coming on the podcast. This has been an amazing conversation. I was excited about this one. And it's one that I'll probably go back and take notes on just for various reasons. This is awesome. So thanks.
No, I appreciate you and I appreciate your viewers. And hopefully, whoever is watching this, would trust us to have one of our machines in their homes one day. Yes. I have my own kids and I want to make sure that whatever product we put in there is safe for your kids as well. Because otherwise, the first prototype's going in my own house. And I'll use my own family as guinea pigs to say, how does it taste? How does it smell? Is anybody feeling a bit sick? Yes. And I'll make sure it gets tested thoroughly before we put it into the market.
Well, I'm going to hold off a little while longer before I get this water problem solved. I'm waiting for your product to come to market. I'm anticipating that for next year. So,
no, Lee, thank you so much.
If we want to send people your way, where do we send them?
.com, but with two V's. So VVater.com. You can also find us on X, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or we also build artificial beaches. So maybe you live in a community or a city that we're having a beach built next to you. Otherwise, just visit the website.
That's awesome. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, Lee.